It's interesting to me that PNPM started as sort of like an amalgamation of a few different projects. So there's this issue where you had commented on Alexander Grill's IED project, and there's like Rico Star Cruz who was involved in this, and I don't know, y'all started collaborating, and then kind of like PNPM came out of that. Can you tell us a little bit about the lore there? Like, how did that all come
Yeah, yeah.
about? And
So actually, it started before me. I think I was the way I found PNPM was we had a huge monorepo at Just Answer. I don't know if you have heard about Just Answer. It's a Q&A website where verified experts answer your questions. So I worked at Just Answer, and we had a huge monorepo for front-end components. And the way it worked was there was like a registry in the San Francisco office. We were installing from Europe, and it was terribly slow. And also, it was a really not sophisticated, I guess, monorepo structure. At that time, it was like just a directory with dozens of package folders. Every package folder had like a packages on, and there was a shell script that was running npm install in every single folder. And this wasn't super huge monorepo at that time, but still installation was taking up like 30 minutes. Yeah, and disk
that's
space
wild.
usage was crazy. Like I never had free disk space on my computer. I guess I was searching for something about this, and probably that's how I found PNPM. And I started reading about it, about symlinks, about this new node modules layout, and about speed. Yeah, I think, yeah, speed was the main concern. Probably I was Googling how to make install faster. And it indeed, PNPM was blazingly fast. Like at that time, it was before Yarn version 1 came out, and PM was maybe more than 10 times slower than PNPM, maybe even 15. Yeah, I tested it locally, and it was awesome. So 30 minutes became like 2 minutes. So it blew my mind. And also, as I mentioned earlier, I really wanted to be like an open source person, because I was terrible at interviews. I don't like interviews. So this I was planning to build my own like brand to make it easier. And I started to look into PNPM because even though it was really fast, it wasn't working after installation. It was like a proof of concept, and a lot of stuff wasn't yet implemented. I think it was like summer 2016. And I started contributing, fixing bugs. And after like 3 months, Rico Stackruz gave me all the privileges because he didn't want to work on it. And yeah, as you mentioned IED. So that was like the project that initially implemented this symlinked idea. So IED was created by Alexander Google, and the reason it was created was because he didn't like the flat or hoisted node modules that the npm team chose to switch to in npm version 3. It was so long time ago that probably most of the people don't even know about this. But npm 2 had like a nested node module structure, and it had many issues, mainly because of the long path issue on Windows, because on Windows you have a limit to the number of in a file name. And it was like, I guess at the beginning it wasn't an issue because npm wasn't so big, but then when you started to have like hundreds of dependencies, it quickly escalated. So they had to solve it somehow, and they came up with the flat node modules layout. And that's when this first alternatives appeared.
The summer of 2016 must have really been like the summer of Monorepos, because that's also when I got into it. It's funny because the first episode we had on DevTools-fm was talking about all of our 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 choice picks for like monorepo tooling, and at that time PNPM hadn't really like scratched into my view yet. Like during that 2016 summer, I didn't actually ever discover PNPM. I went directly into Yarn, and with Yarn v1, I felt like going from NPM in a monorepo structure to Yarn v1 in a monorepo structure was like a huge gain. And we saw like that literally unlocked monorepos for us in that one project. But at the time, you said you were disappointed with the structure of Yarn and what it delivered. Can you like go into that a little bit and like how PNPM fixes what you saw wrong with Yarn?
Yeah, so I think we are a bit mixed up with the timeline, maybe because when maybe it wasn't 2016. Either me or you is wrong, because Yarn came out 6 months, approximately half a year after I started working on PNPM. So it was already in development when I found PNPM, but it wasn't like publicly, now nobody knew about it. Yeah, and actually I was terrified when Yarn became public, because I spent really a lot of time on PNPM, half a year, and Yarn really blew up in a few days. It got huge traction in the community. I thought PNPM is over. I got a little bit depressed. Then I think Yarn was still slower than PNPM. It was a lot faster than NPM, but still slower than PM. Maybe probably more stable than PNPM. But because of the speed and because of the different layout, I kept working on PNPM even after Yarn came out. Sorry, what was the question about monorepos?
Yeah, I was asking about like how you were disappointed with Yarn. Almost a little bit of a leading question, because with Yarn v1, while it did improve upon NPM structure, it didn't have like the cache methodology that PNPM and Yarn 2 went with. I feel like the real aha moment was for me was like, do I go to Barry or do I go to PNPM? And PNPM was like the way for me.
I think maybe I was disappointed because they chose the flat node modules.
Yeah, I think it's amazing that you like push through that moment and you're like, you know what, no, I'm going to double down and I'm going to build this. And then after all these years, that was whether Yarn came, I guess, 2017 or whenever it came out. That's still been, it's been quite a while now. And just to be like, to validate your work, I pretty much, I don't know anybody who uses Yarn personally, unless it is like a legacy Yarn 1. And there are still some folks that I know who use like NPM just because it's like there and the default when they're installing Node. But like most everybody else is like PNPM, and it's like almost become table stakes for Node. And I just think that like you've done a lot of work over the years to make that happen, and that's a great job. Looking back on that, it took you it took y'all a while to reach version 1.0. It seemed like it was like about a 2-year effort. It was like a lot of push. And you'd sort of wrote about like how getting the symlinked node module structure to work was like a particular challenge. So like what was the journey into that like symlink structure, or like rethinking how node modules are structured, and what were the big challenges there?
So I think the biggest challenge was resolving peer dependencies, because when a dependency has a peer dependency, you might get duplications of that package, of that dependency, because this peer dependency might be resolved from different versions of that peer dependency at different places of the dependency graph. And if you open the .pnpm directory in your node modules, you can see that it's a flat structure where every directory is the name of a package and the version of the package. However, if a package relies on peer dependencies, you'll see also like a list of the peer dependencies there. So if a dependency has peer dependencies, it might have like duplicates, which is actually not good. You need to try to reduce this, but we need to support it. And I'm not sure the first version worked completely correctly with peer dependencies, because somehow every year peer dependencies become more complex. And I think the first time PNPM did it fully correctly was version 9. And the reason this is was so hard, is because peer dependencies can have peer dependencies of their own. So it's a recursive story. And basically we need to build a peer dependency graph and then hash this graph and use it as the directory name inside .pnpm. And also, the peer dependencies can be also used inside sub-dependencies of these dependencies. So it's very complex.
Yeah, I've definitely hit upon that complexity myself. Peer dependencies, I'd say no matter what package manager I've used, have been like a tough thing to deal with. But the way PNPM approaches it, at least, is it feels like one of the more sane ways, where you can actually see like how the peers have resolved very easily and see the duplicates very easily. Whereas if it's not all that flat, it's almost impossible to debug those issues.
Yeah, I think what we lack is ways to debug your graph. Like after you installed it, have some tooling to help you figure out what is happening inside node modules. Because right now you can run PNPM list, but it's very cluttered. Or you can manually try to read your log file, but it's hard. Actually, I've worked now on a feature that might help with this.
Since you've thought about it a lot, do you think peer dependencies were a mistake? Do you think they're necessary? Is it like a bit of complexity we put in our own paths and just trip over constantly?
I think probably they are needed. I don't know if we could re-architect it without peer dependencies. Maybe it would be possible. I don't think about it much because it's so baked into the ecosystems that it would be impossible to change. And actually the challenge was, now that I'm over it, I'm proud that I could solve it. But like I spent hundreds of hours to make it work. But now I'm proud that it worked out. Yeah. Maybe all these recursive peer dependencies, maybe what we could do is limit it a bit, because probably sometimes they are not needed, but people still use them. I don't understand why peer dependencies should have peer dependencies of their own. I'm not sure. And also why some packages have like 10 or more peer dependencies. So yeah.
Yeah, it was like I feel like people either don't use them at all or they overuse them. It's like people discover them and you like get in these projects and there's so many.
And also they are very hard because you basically publish a range and then it's complete chaos.